I think of Dr. Fauci. Probably never heard of him. You did. Ann heard him. He's a very fine research top doctor at National Institute of Health.
Dr. Anthony Fauci. During his tenure, Fauci has served 6 presidents and worked to battle AIDS, SARS, Ebola, Zika, and coronavirus. Blunt voice.
It is a failing. Let's admit it. Things will get worse before
and
they
we're
get
trying
better.
for a cure, but a cure is going to be problematic. A cure means that you essentially eradicate the virus, which we have not been able to do, or suppress it in a way that doesn't require daily antiretroviral drugs. So the two remaining challenges, where are we on the road to a cure, and where are we on the road to a vaccine?
Brothers and sisters, do you know what time it is? What time is it?
Remember, all I'm offering is the truth.
And on the cool check-in, center stage on the mic.
How y'all feel out there?
Now,
Hidden in plain sight.
and mind your business.
Watch out.
New world order.
I'm not gonna take this anymore.
You know what I'm saying? So what you saying?
Check this out.
Here we go.
But guess what? The HIV-1 bioweapon, it is patented and owned by Anthony Fauci.
With this Children's Defense Fund with the Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has, as I pointed out earlier, has got the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And that is astounding because it's called The Real Anthony Fauci.
And now, and I know that you spoke to Dr. Fauci this weekend, and I'm just wondering, was he aware that the White House is releasing this list of basically opposition research about him, his so-called mistakes that the Trump administration wants reporters to be aware of?
Yeah, he's very aware of it, Allison. I talk to Dr. Fauci regularly, and I will say that even though we don't see him on television, he does remain accessible to me, to a few other folks as well. So he's still, very interested in getting this information out there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's sort of been this crescendo. At first, it was, the task force meetings, the task force briefing sort of going away, and then it was best described as an out of sight, out of mind. No one's necessarily mad at Dr. Fauci, but we'd rather not see him because he reminds us of something we don't want to think about. And now it's gone into this sort of much more attack sort of mode. Let's go back and look at the things that Dr. Fauci has said, and let's point out all the places that he's wrong. Let me show you one quick example, because this was an example that the White House is using to say, hey, look, Dr. Fauci, he's a nice guy, but he's not always right. I want you to hear the beginning of this interview and then also listen to the back part of it as well. Just listen really quick here.
Should we be changing our habits, and if so, how?
No, right now, at this moment, there is no need to change anything that you're doing on a day-by-day basis.
Now, that was February 29th, okay? And that's what the White House says. Hey, look, you got it wrong, right? No need to change anything on a day-by-day basis. The problem is, and we see this over and over again, they eliminated the rest of what Dr. Fauci said. So listen to this.
Right now, the risk is still low, but this could change. I've said that many times, even on this program. You've got to watch out, because although the risk is low now, you don't need to change anything you're doing. When you start to see community spread, this could change and force you to become much more attentive to doing things that would protect you from spread.
So there you go, right? Therein lies the context. Did everybody know everything at the very beginning of this pandemic? No. That's why, in part, this is a novel coronavirus, a new coronavirus, and so everyone was figuring things out. But the point is that even back then, February 29th, Dr. Fauci said, here's the trigger. If we start to see community spread, that changes the game. So he wasn't wrong. It's just that hadn't happened yet, and that's the point he was trying to make.
Joining us now, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Chief Medical Advisor to President Biden, among many other titles. Nice to see you, sir. We appreciate it. It's always a little disconcerting for the world to read your emails, 3,000 of them over the past 24 hours or so. As you look back, I won't ask you, are there any you regret, because that's too easy of a question. Are there any you wish you would have sent, or things you wish you would have said over the past year that you didn't?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the form of communication we have is, phone calls, texts, emails. I don't think I can say that there's something that I wish I would have sent, because generally, if I don't do it by email, I'll do it by another mechanism. The only issue and the trouble with, and it's understandable because I'm a public servant and people, by freedom of information can get access to the emails. The only trouble is they are really ripe to be taken out of context, where someone can snip out a sentence in an email without showing the other emails and say, based on an email from Dr. Fauci, he said such and such, where you don't really have the full context in which
so
he
maybe
said it.
a couple of these that are going around the internet, maybe you could provide that context for us. This from you about masks. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. Conceivably, even cloth masks allow even more things through. Were you incorrect then? I'm trying to understand the evolution of that.
Well, let me explain, and it's really important because it is a complicated issue. At the time that we were saying it wasn't necessary to be wearing masks, there were three things that were going on. One of them was there was a consideration that there was a shortage of personal protective equipment, particularly among people who actually needed the masks, those who were taking care of patients in the hospital. So we were encouraged let me finish. You have a skeptical look on your eye. Let me finish. And is that we were told at the level of the discussions in the situation room, even by the Surgeon General, that there was a problem. We didn't want to have people running to the stores and getting N95s or even any other mask. There wasn't any indication, number two, that masks outside of the setting of the hospital actually worked to protect acquisition and prevent transmission. It ultimately showed that it did, but there were no data then.
So I guess the question would be this, hold on, but just why the certitude, though? It seems as though so often we were told things by you and by others from the White House podium and other places in interviews. Do you wish perhaps there would have been a little bit more of, we don't know, but this is what we think, rather than these extraordinarily clear edicts and directions that later turned out to perhaps not be true?
Well, if you could show me that email again, put it up, we could go over it. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, we'll see if the control room can put this up. Yeah. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material.
Yeah. So the typical mask that you would buy in a drugstore, namely the non-N95, the ones that don't fit very well, you're right. The way that is written can be misinterpreted in a way, and I probably should have added a few more sentences, because one of the issues that if you go into a drugstore and get a typical mask and put it on, it generally doesn't fit particularly well.
We've all learned that over the past year, for sure.
So I should probably have been more explicit, you're right, and said there are a number of aspects to it, including the poor fitting. So if you want me to say, if I had to do that email over again, I would have written a lot more sentences in there. By the way, who was that email to? You see, that's the thing. How things are taken out of context. Do you grant me that?
I grant you a lot. And I remember talking to you during that time in February and March of the pandemic, and it'd be hard to find a man who was more in demand or who was working harder during that time than you were. Speaking of that time, and as we've come through the pandemic, there's recent reports now that there's both a book deal and a movie deal involving you, a biography, biopic on Disney, and then a book deal. Are you getting any compensation for those?
Zero, not a single penny. Let me say that again, because, the web out there with all of their extraordinarily ad hominem attacks, nothing. I have not written a book. Nat Geo is doing what they've done a fair amount, is making a documentary. I'm in the documentary. It's about me and public service. It's a documentary about public service.
I think that was the question. You answered the question. There's not a penny. You're not getting a penny.
Not a single penny. Zero.
Fair enough. And then I want to get you to expand on this. And obviously, when you're before Congress, congressmen and senators love to talk oftentimes and run out the clock and don't give you a chance to answer. This was your exchange with Senator Kennedy a couple of days ago. Take a listen.
You gave them money and you said, don't do gain of function research.
Correct.
And they said, we won't.
Correct.
And you have no way of knowing whether they did or not, except you trust them. Is that right?
Well, we generally always trust the grantee to do what they say. And you look at the results.
Have you ever had a grantee lie to you?
I cannot guarantee that a grantee has not lied to us because you never know.
Other than taking the Chinese word for it, do we have any idea on what's going on inside the Wuhan lab or what went on inside the Wuhan lab?
Well, again, let's put things in context. The scientists in the Wuhan lab for years and years, among other credible, trusted scientists in China. We're not talking about the Communist Chinese Party. We're not talking about the Chinese military. We're talking about scientists that we've had relationships for years. What it was is that it was a grant that went to EcoHealth, which is...
No, I understand all that, but you just said something... Hold on. You just said something very important here when you said it's not the Chinese military, it's not the Chinese party. This is an interesting quote from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford. It's a distinction without a difference between the Chinese Communist Party, the government, and the Chinese military. Is that something that never occurred to anybody who was giving money to Chinese researchers who said they were civilian? And we've got the chairman here saying there's no distinction.
But did the chairman say there's no distinction between the scientists and the military? I don't think the chairman said that. If you could read that again.
Dunford said Thursday that the Chinese typically require companies doing business in China. That's not even talking about scientists. Or it's talking about businesses, which is lower than even Chinese government scientists. To have members of the ruling Communist Party in that company, a requirement that will allow the Chinese military access to the company's intellectual property. It's a distinction without a difference between the Chinese Communist Party, the government, and the Chinese military. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is we should just trust the Chinese when they say, the military has nothing to do with this. We should believe them.
No, what I'm saying is that we have very many years of experience of productive interaction with Chinese scientists. For example, Dr. George Gao, who's the director of the Chinese CDC, has been a colleague for many years. He's a member of the United States National Academy of Sciences, number one. Right. Number two, the scientists there and others that we've dealt with the original SARS, with influenza virtually every year. The scientists are
Doctor, I'm not disputing that you had great work with him, but what I'm trying to get at is that all of the comments that were made about what happened inside that lab are based essentially on taking the Chinese word for it. No matter how good your experiences were over years or decades, it seems pretty clear that the Chinese lied about a number of things related to the coronavirus. Right. We can all agree about that. And I'm wondering now, how can the American people be assured as we look at this that, for example, the money that went to the Wuhan lab didn't end up being used by the Chinese military? It seems as though you can't say that for certain.
Well, can we again, with due respect, put things into perspective? The Wuhan lab is a very large lab to the tune of hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion.
Right.
Take that. The grant that we're talking about was $600,000 over 5 years for an average of about $125,000 to $140,000 a year. So now you making extrapolation that we sent in.
No, sir, I'm not making any extrapolation. No, sir, I'm not making any extrapolation. I'm simply saying the fact of the matter is that so much of what we were told as Americans about what we knew from the Chinese was based simply on taking their word.
Right.
That's fair. Okay. And based on that, we really have no idea who the scientists were in the lab. Some of the names that you tossed out, who I'm sure have done wonderful research, could very easily have, shall we say, dual purposes, dual roles, and dual obligations, both to the Chinese military and to the civilian CDC, as General Dunford thought.
So can I just make a statement, please, without interrupting? And hopefully, I mean, if we're going to be talking in good faith, let's talk in good faith. This is a sub-award from a larger grant that received one of the highest scores from American peer reviewers of research that needed to be done. So you say, why do it in China? You do it in China through a very well-known, highly qualified laboratory. Now, you're absolutely correct that I can't guarantee everything that's going on in the Wuhan lab. We can't do that, but it is our obligation as scientists and public health individuals to study the animal-human interface, because we had a very difficult experience that we lucked out that we didn't get hurt too badly with the original SARS in 2002 and 2003, which was clearly a jumping of species from a bat to a civet cat to a human. So it was incumbent upon us to study the animal-human interface and to understand what potential these viruses have of infecting humans, which then might damage the United States. So please let me finish. So you don't want to go to Hoboken, New Jersey, or to Fairfax, Virginia, to be studying the bat-human interface that might lead to an outbreak. So you go to China. And when you go to China, you have to understand you have the terms of an award, and you say, this is what you can do with the $130,000, $140,000 a year that we're giving you. You get an annual progress report from the lab. And when you look at what was done, there is nothing in there that indicates anything close to creating a virus that has great transmissibility and great pathogenicity in humans. That is what we have done with them. What is getting conflated is the broader issue of what the Communist Party will or will not do and what Wuhan. And I think that's an inappropriate conflating.
I understand it, and I appreciate laying it out in that way. I wanted to get a thought from you about the president's comments today, pulling out all the stops, in his words, to get 70% of Americans their first dose by July 4th. At that point, assuming things work in the way they are working in the vaccine, is this over by the end of summer?
You know, I don't think it's over in the sense of it's done, finished, but it is very, very much of a giant step towards the normality that we all want so very much. Because if you get 70% of the adult population with at least one dose by the 4th of July, you will have enough people that will either be fully or partially protected, that even though the virus is not going to disappear, it will diminish greatly as a public health threat, which means we can get closer to normality. And we feel that by the time we get to the summer, it will get better and better. The thing we want to see is a continual diminution in the number of cases per day, so that we're no longer dealing with a public health threat. We're dealing with a small level of infection. I don't believe we ever will eradicate SARS-CoV-2. I hope we will be able to eliminate it or greatly control it in this country.
Well, and we do control a lot of things, and that's the good work you and your folks at the NIH do. Dr. Fauci, we appreciate your time. As always, good to see you, sir. Come back anytime.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All the best.
Fauci, he's been trained to answer questions like a politician.
Yes, I see that. Yeah, exactly. Certain thing, he a lot of double speak.
Right.
There's a lot of there was tons of double speak lingo there. Yeah. It's just amazing. I mean, from what from the little bit of interaction that they had, things keep coming up, as far as, you have people that's question Fauci and his the money that's been spent, his actions and his decisions of how he going about having things taken care of. Um, there are also doubts and questions about the the research labs and the people that's in those research labs. Are they trustworthy? When you start having things like that happen, it becomes a big mess a big mess of a situation. And this is you can start seeing how over the time from 80s to 90s to 2020, 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, how everything is shifted and breaking down to a point where people are now asking questions. And so that posed the question, is Dr. Fauci falling off his game? Do you think he's needs to retire? Do you think he's too old to handle this situation? He's not a young chicken anymore. He's 80 years old, 79, 80. So this guy is people might test that, grandpa need to go ahead and sit down, sit this one out. What say you, Too?
I'm not sure when he should retire, but I'm pretty sure he's thinking about it. By this point in time, he should be thinking about it.
Yeah.
But we come from a country where the mentality more or less is it's better to keep the devil than to accept a new devil, because you don't know what the new devil gonna bring to you.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. Once he retires, will things be able to be corrected? And who would be the right person for that job? Because there's a lot of correction needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so moving along, we're coming to the forefront of things. And this is just several months ago with Senator Paul asking Dr. Fauci about his action.
11th, where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
And I was kind of hostile.
Yeah, it was a little rough there, wasn't it?
I think.
Yeah.
I think. He didn't want to answer the question, so he attacked him, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the question was that difficult to answer, but usually when people attack you, it's because you forced them into a corner that they don't want to be in.
Right.
So he seemed like he was in a corner he didn't necessarily want to be in.
And he lashed out, yeah.
Yeah. Ended up calling the man the liar. He didn't know what he was talking about, but he didn't answer not one question. Okay.
Yeah. And this is the second, I believe, testimony when they brought him before Congress again, Senate, was it Senate and Congress? And this is part 2 with Senator Rand Paul.
Okay.
Dr. Fauci, the idea that a government official like yourself would claim unilaterally to represent science, that any criticism of you would be considered a criticism of science itself, is quite dangerous. Central planning, whether it be of the economy or of science, is risky because of the fallibility of the planner. It would not be so catastrophic if the planner were simply one physician in Peoria. Then the mistakes would only affect that physician's patients, the people who chose that physician. But when the planner is a government official, like yourself, who rules by mandate, the errors are compounded and become much more harmful. A planner who believes he is the science leads to an arrogance that justifies, in his mind, using government resources to smear and to destroy the reputations of other scientists who disagree with him. In an email exchange with Dr. Collins, you conspire, and I quote here directly from the email, to create a quick and devastating published takedown of 3 prominent epidemiologists from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. Apparently, there's a lot of fringe epidemiologists at Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. And you quote in the email that they, or from Dr. Collins, and you agree that they are fringe. And immediately there's this takedown effort. A published takedown, though, doesn't exactly conjure up the image of a dispassionate scientist. Instead of engaging them on the merits, you and Dr. Collins sought to smear them as fringe and take them down. And not in journals, in lay press. This is not only antithetical to the scientific method, it's the epitome of cheap politics, and it's reprehensible, Dr. Fauci. Do you really think it's appropriate to use your $420,000 salary to attack scientists that disagree with you?
The email you're referring to was an email of Dr. Collins to me. If you look at the email
that you responded to and hurried up and said, I can do it. We got something in Wired magazine.
No. I think in usual fashion, Senator, you are distorting everything about me.
Did you ever object to Dr. Collins' characterization of them as fringe? Did you write back to Dr. Collins and say, no, they're not fringe, they're esteemed scientists, and it would be beneath me
I did not
do that? You responded to him that you would do it, and you immediately got an article in Wired, and you sent it back to him and said, hey, look, I've got him. I nailed him in Wired of all scientific publications.
That's not what went on. There you go again. You just do the same thing every hearing.
That was your response. And this wasn't the only time. So your desire to take down people...
You're absolutely incorrect. As usual, Senator, you are incorrect almost everything you said.
Well, no, you deny, but the emails tell the truth of this.
No.
This wasn't the only time. Your desire to take down those who disagree with you didn't stop with Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. You conspired with Peter Daszak, who you communicated with privately, and other members of the scientific community that wrote opinion pieces for Nature. 5 of them signed a paper for Nature, an opinion piece. 17 signed a paper that called it conspiracy theory, the idea that the virus could have originated in the lab. Do you think words like conspiracy theory should be in a scientific paper?
Senator, I never used that word when I was referring to it. You're distorting virtually everything.
Did you communicate with the 5 scientists who wrote the opinion piece in Nature where they were describing, there's no way this could have come from the lab?
That was not me.
Did you talk with any of those scientists privately?
You keep distorting the truth. It is stunning how you do that.
Did you talk to any of the scientists privately
who
wrote the opinion? You did. Well, what were they telling you privately?
Well, let me explain. You're going back to that original discussion when I brought together a group of people to look at every possibility with an open mind. So not only are you distorting it,
You are completely turning it around, as
Were
you
most of the
usually
scientists
do.
that came to you privately, did they come to you privately and say, no way, this came from the lab? Or was their initial impression, Dr. Gary and others that were involved, was their initial impression actually that it looked very suspicious for a virus that came from a lab?
Senator, we are here at a committee to look at a virus now that has killed almost 900,000 people. And the purpose of the committee was to try and get things out, how we can help to get the American public. And you keep coming back to personal attacks on me that have absolutely no relevance to reality.
Do you think anybody has had more influence over our
let me
response to
finish.
this than you have? Do you think
Madam
it's a great
Chair, can I-
success? Do you think it's a great success what's happened so
Right.
far? Do you think
You-
the
you have
lockdowns
said-
were good for our kids? Do you think we slowed down the death rate? More people have died now under President Biden than did under President Trump. You are the one responsible. You are the architect. You are the lead architect for the response from the government, and now 800,000 people have died.
Right.
So you think it's a winning success, what you've advocated for government?
Senator, first of all, if you look at everything that I said, you accuse me of in a monolithic way telling people what they need to do. Everything that I've said has been in support of the CDC guidelines. Wear a mask, get boosted.
And you've advocated to make it coercive and
take
done
a look
through
at
force, and
everything
you've
that I've
advocated that
said.
it be done by mandate.
Right.
You've advocated that your infallible opinion be dictated by law.
Right. So again, Madam Chair, I would like just a couple of minutes because this happens all the time. You personally attack me, and with absolutely not a shred of evidence of anything you say. So I would like to make something clear to the committee. He's doing this for political reasons. What you need to do is, he said in front of this committee.
Do you think your takedown of three prominent epidemiologists was not political?
You don't want me
That
to
was my
finish because
question.
you know what I'm going to say.
That was the question.
Senator,
Were you
we
political
will-
in taking
at this-
down
at
these
this
three
point-
prominent
Senator
epidemiologists?
Paul, if you would please, I'm going to allow Dr. Fauci to respond. We have a number of senators who would like to ask questions, and I would like him to be able to respond. Please do so.
So the last time we had a committee, or the time before, he was accusing me of being responsible for the death of 4 to 5 million people, which is really irresponsible. And I say, why is he doing that? There are two reasons why that's really bad. The first is it distracts from what we're all trying to do here today, is get our arms around the epidemic and the pandemic that we're dealing with, not something imaginary. Number two, what happens when he gets out and accuses me of things that are completely untrue is that all of a sudden that kindles the crazies out there, and I have threats upon my life, harassment of my family and my children with obscene phone calls because people are lying about me. Now, I guess you could say, well, that's the way it goes. I can take the hit. Well, it makes a difference because, as some of you may know, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, on December 21st, a person was arrested who was on their way from Sacramento to Washington, D.C., at a speed stop in Iowa. And the police asked him where he was going, and he was going to Washington, D.C. to kill Dr. Fauci. And they found in his car an AR-15 and multiple magazines of ammunition because he thinks that maybe I'm killing people. So I ask myself, why would Senator want to do this? So go to Rand Paul website, and you see Fire Dr. Fauci with a little box that says, contribute here. You can do $5, $10, $20, $100. So you are making a catastrophic epidemic for your political gain. So the
You
only
have
thing
politically
the only thing
attacked
that I
your
can-
colleagues, and in a political